Chairwoman DeGette, for holding this truly important hearing today and for allowing me to participate. I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today and for your insightful testimony, the stories and challenges that you have shared with us on this committee, hearing about pharmacists refusing to fill prescriptions, not necessarily out of a lack of desire, but out of fear of the law, confusion about whether and when and how to treat ectopic pregnancies, sending patients experiencing miscarriage home from the hospital because they are not sick enough. I'm hearing those stories too, because they're happening to my constituents in my home state of Texas. Contrary to some of the things that we have heard today, we know that these things are real, that these things are happening, that they are creating a crisis. There was a recent New York Times article that talked about a woman experiencing miscarriage in Texas, but she was sent home because she wasn't bleeding enough. I've heard in my district of women being told to go home until they have a fever and then come back to the hospital. And this has been true since last September, before Dobbs, but this crisis has grown exponentially since last month. And despite suggestions to the contrary today, there is great confusion and chaos and fear among physicians and providers and patients and the people who love them. And there's great fear not only about what care they can get or give without being subject to criminal prosecution, but also what they can even say to their patients, what they can tell them about how, whether, where they can get the care that they need. Ms. Bracey-Sherman, you said something that really struck me in your opening comments, that no one should be prosecuted for the outcomes of their pregnancies. And yet that is exactly what's happening in Texas. We've already heard that the Texas Attorney General is suing the federal government over EMTALA. Just 2 weeks ago now, a group of lawmakers in Texas publicized a letter that they sent to a law firm in Texas threatening the firm and each of its partners with felony criminal prosecution and disbarment for the firm's policy to reimburse employees that were traveling out of state to get abortion care. And they cited a 1925 law that they claim is still on the books, as well as SB 8, the bill that went into effect in September. What we are hearing in this hearing, what we've heard from our colleagues since we've raised these issues in Congress, is that we're hearing from a lot of anti-abortion politicians that these bans won't stop doctors from treating ectopic pregnancies or miscarriages, but that's not what we're seeing on the ground. And we heard a witness in another committee last week say that abortion care that a 10-year-old received wasn't an abortion. I don't even know what that was. But Dr. Verma, can you talk about how these laws impact a doctor's ability to treat the complexities of pregnancy care? And then in addition, because I don't want to interrupt you, can you also talk about the Dobbs decision and how these new laws will affect overall maternal health outcomes, including maternal mortality, which is another crisis in Texas?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So like we discussed a little bit today, as doctors, we're constantly practicing and providing care in a gray area. There aren't these lines in the sand, these clear-cut lines where a patient goes from totally fine to actively dying. And so even when we're in situations where we know what the right thing to do is medically, the laws are preventing us from being able to provide that care to our patients. And thank you for bringing up maternal mortality. I think that's an incredibly important issue that I feel deeply about. So current data do support an association between restricted access to safe and legal abortion and higher rates of maternal morbidity and mortality. And we know that already marginalized populations like people of color experience the largest burden. And so I think that's something that's really important to note, that we are going to see maternal outcomes get worse based on these laws. I just also want to quickly note for the record that our science-based medical organizations have assessed the data and have established that abortion is not at all linked to preterm birth.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. And Madam Chair, I'd like to request unanimous consent to enter the letter that I mentioned into the record.
All the document requests will be considered at the end of the hearing.
Thank you so much,
Madam Chairwoman.
Imminent. In the few seconds I have left, I just want to say that I will submit some additional questions for the record, because I think that the issues that have been raised today raise further questions, and I just want to thank all of our witnesses for the work that they're doing, for the compassionate, thoughtful approach that they are taking to this issue, and that it reflects the majority of the Americans' views about whether, when, and how pregnant women and families should make their choices. And I really appreciated, Dr. Guerrero, your discussion about how we should be thinking about this as part of our lives. And I just think the testimony has been so incredibly helpful. I thank you for your time today, and I thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to participate in this hearing, and I yield back.